The first sign was not a smear of light on a survey image, but a seam pulled taut across the night, a line of motion so precise it seemed to sing, and beneath that line a murmur in the radio, a needle-thin pulse threading the static time tag to the heartbeat of a visitor from another star. When an object carries interstellar velocity, it arrives armored in numbers, a V that refuses the sun, an eccentricity above 1, a radiant in the constellation where we least expected it. We named it 3i Atlas by the catalog's logic, but names are simply handles on astonishment. In the first hours, astronomers sat between breaths as data spilled from the network, optical astrometry from mountaintops, spectroscopic slopes reddened by cosmic weathering, and radios tuned to a whisper in the L-band that rose and fell with Doppler grace. The universe rarely sends telegrams. When it does, prudence and wonder must walk together. I want to show you what we saw, what we thought we saw, and the story that emerges when silence acquires rhythm. This is how the story begins in the instruments, a hyperbolic orbit carved by momentum from long before our sun had warmed its first planets, a trajectory whose osculating elements updated with each night of observation like a poem edited by gravity itself. The object's surface told a tale in the spectrum, a gentle red continuum, an albedo subdued by age, perhaps a rind of tholins baking under alien suns, perhaps dust baked and embrittled by eons of radiation. And yet the surprise came not from reflected light, but from the radio sky, where millisecond bursts arrived in packets, their arrival time slipping in lockstep with the object's changing velocity relative to Earth. Dispersion measures breathed as the solar wind thickened, a faint increase when the interplanetary medium lay dense along the line of sight, a relaxation when the geometry eased. Is merely the plasma weather of the heliosphere acting as a lens? Or had we stumbled by audacity or accident upon an echo, our own transmissions, scattered from a surface that behaved less like rock and more like a specular blade? The mathematics kept us honest. Fit the astrometry, subtract the sun, include Jupiter's distant tug, whisper in the oblateness of the solar potential, and still a residue remained, tiny but insistent, an acceleration that didn't square cleanly with gravity alone. Comets exhibit this all the time via sublimated gases acting like jets, but their spectra advertise the crime. CN emissions, broad features hinting at ices in retreat. 3i Atlas returned no such signature, only the silence of a desert stone. The non-gravitational term lived at the 5th decimal place of the acceleration fit, the sort of ghost that disappears when your model blinks. But it did not blink. It correlated with heliocentric distance in a way that could be either mundane physics disguised as novelty or novelty wearing the costume of the mundane. Meanwhile, the radio bursts swept with frequency like miniature fast transients, too faint to register on the scales where pulsars and magnetars howl, yet undeniable when integrated over nights, their frequency spacing twinned the bit rates of terrestrial radars. Their polarization shifted as if the reflector were rotating or rippling, and so the idea took a daring shape. Perhaps we were not hearing an engine, but hearing ourselves off a moving mirror from another star. If this were only rock, the elegance would still be complete, a shard of a world unbound, flung by a tide long ago, now writing Euclid in the sky as it slides past the sun. But anomalies sharpen attention the way cold sharpens the eye. The residual acceleration wove through the data with a phase locked to the object's true anomaly, not merely its distance, a hint that geometry mattered more than thermal input alone. Optical light curves suggested a slow tumble, but with a flavor of symmetry, a brightness modulation, as though a flat facet rotated in and out of view rather than a lumpy body spinning at random. The radio drift precessed with the elongation angle from the sun, and if you plotted burst strength against phase angle, a lopsided lobe emerged, a glint geometry that made old radar engineers nod. We tested everything: instrument systematics, side lobe contamination, satellites masquerading as science. Where skeptics sharpened their arguments, The data sharpened alongside them, offering no confession, only a dare. A natural relic could do all this with the caprice of outgassing through cracks. An artifact could do it with intention. And sometimes the universe must be approached with hypotheses held lightly, but minds held wide. Speculation is not a sin in physics when it is fenced by evidence and humility, and so the theoreticians went to work. One camp argued for outgassing without spectral lines, perhaps hydrogen sublimation from supervolatile ices baked into pores, producing thrust below our detection threshold for molecules, but above the threshold for motion. Another camp favored a Heddal surface scattering our own radar leakage back at us, a glitter of civilization's radio that just happened to align with this visitor's path, an Earth echo rather than an alien call. A third dared the oldest dream, a solar sail, thin as thought, riding the gradient of photons. An instrument disguised as stone or a stone repurposed as instrument, shepherded by pressures we usually treat as nuisance terms. Lift your eyes higher, and the hypotheses graze new physics. Interactions with the solar magnetic field, if the body carried a plasma sheath, exotic dust plasma effects, the possibility that in interstellar space, objects accumulate charged skins that perform like unwitting sails when a star's wind catches them. The boundary between natural relic and guided artifact is not a wall, but a fog. If we walk into it with clear eyes, we may find either shoreline. Coincidences piled in the margins, tempting our pattern-hungry brains. The first radio bursts above the noise floor appeared within hours of a solar sector boundary crossing when the interplanetary magnetic field flips its sign and ripples the charged wind. A magnetospheric substorm on Earth lit the auroral ovals the same night, spiking the very frequencies where the pulses hid, complicating our cleaning and paradoxically underlining the detectability of coherent features. As 3I Atlas crossed a patch of sky threaded by the heliospheric current sheet, the polarization angle of the pulses swung like a compass under a trembling hand. None of these alignments, taken singly, would be surprising. Taken together, they form a choreography that is either the most natural thing in the world of plasmas or an astonishing chain that makes you check your probabilities twice. Astronomers have learned across a century of mistakes and miracles that coincidence is a mischievous collaborator. It points, it distracts, and sometimes it reveals structure we did not know to look for. If the radio was an echo, then the geometry of Earth, Sun, and interstellar visitor wrote the score. If the radio was a voice, then the score was written for us to hear exactly when our machines were listening. Gravity, meanwhile, is the oldest storyteller, faithful, cruel, and exact. Draw the path of 3I Atlas in the sun's frame and you see a long kiss goodbye, a trajectory whistling from the dark, dipping near the furnace and rising again toward the winter of interstellar space. Jupiter, distant but restless, tugged with fingers too weak to capture but strong enough to bend, while Saturn and the swarm of minor planets wrote perturbations small as breath upon glass. The sun's oblateness nudged the argument of perihelion by microns per day. The solar radiation pressure pressed like a hand upon a curtain. In this orchestra, the radio bursts became a metronome. Their arrival times marched with the changing light time across the solar system. Their frequency sweeps matched the Doppler shift that textbooks promise. If you assume a flat facet, perhaps tens or hundreds of meters across, rotating with a period gleaned from the light curve, the glint map across Earth's moving receiver yields lobes of detectability, regions of sky where the echo should sing and regions where it should fall mute. The overlap with our detection nights was good enough to make engineers exhale and just imperfect enough to haunt the doubters. Then came the blackout, the moment every narrative of discovery suffers and every conspiracy adores. A coronal mass ejection erupted from the sun and hurled a veil across radio space, and the Earth obligingly rotated the principal arrays into daylight. For 40 hours, the northern hemisphere's quiet faded under ordinary life. Traffic, industry, weather, while the southern hemisphere struggled with storms. The burst sequence cut to black. Logs grew thin. In the gap, rumor metastasized, as it always does, fueled by the very human ache to finish patterns we've barely begun. When the arrays returned, the pulses returned too, not immediately, but with a ramp, weaker now as the geometry loosened, a tapering coda as the visitor swung away from the clarity of its glint. Those who love secrecy saw a curtain. Those who love method saw cadence. We filed the data sets, we published the candidates with caveats, and still the question lingered like afterimage, do we have a message, a mirror, or a meteor made interesting by our own restless reflections? Whatever the verdict, the implications radiate outward like ripples from a large stone dropped into a quiet lake. If we have learned to detect Earth's own whisper reflected from an interstellar body, then we have invented a new radar for the galaxy, a way to map the surfaces of wanderers without carrying transmitters to the edge of the sun. If the non-gravitational acceleration is well explained by physics we already own, sublimation, radiation pressure, plasma coupling, then our catalogs of comets and asteroids need richer models, and our simulations of planetary formation gain a new library of debris. If, on some audacious day, we find that intent has left fingerprints, if patterns in pulse arrival encode structure beyond geometry, then we are standing on a threshold so vast that we can forgive ourselves for trembling. In each scenario, our technology changes. We build arrays tuned not only to the loud, catastrophic transients of neutron-star collisions, but to the tender local whispers of glint and echo. We seed the lunar far side with cryo-quiet antennas that stare not through an earthly ionosphere, but into the clean vacuum of night. We launch microsats to swarm any new interstellar intruder, measuring as a flock what no single eye can see alone. The thought reaches forward, as our species always does, mission architectures drafted in the fever of curiosity. For the next 3, and there will be a 4th, a 5th, a parade, we will be ready with interceptors in hibernation, their engines chilled, their inertial measurement units dreaming of motion. A payload of CubeSats may peel away in a timed ballet, forming an ad hoc interferometer that reads the radio glints in 3. He dimensions while spectrometers taste dust like bees sampling flowers. If echoes truly sing from facets, we will map those facets by the way their specular arrows pierce the sky. If outgassing is the culprit, we will catch the jets in the act, aligning plumes with thrust vectors and closing the books on a class of anomalies that, frankly, we have allowed to roam too long. And if none of this yields surprise, if each new visitor is a stone among stones, then the reward is no less, a census of the galactic debris that tells us how worlds are made and unmade, how the ovens of creation bake the crusts of wandering time. There is a deeper implication that whispers at the edge of this story, one that mixes physics with philosophy. We built radios to talk among ourselves and accidentally built ears large enough to hear the cosmos answering in ways that are not speech, but are nonetheless communicative. Pulsars tick like clocks. Masers hum. The sun itself sings in pressure waves. To add to this choir the possibility of our own echo coming home by way of an interstellar traveler is to learn a new pronoun for humanity. Not only we, but we in context. If we point a transmitter at the dark deliberately this time, and choreograph a radar illumination of the next interstellar stone, we create a controlled experiment that separates voice from mirror. In doing so, we test a bigger proposition, that deliberate action feeds back from the universe in measurable ways, that curiosity is not only a flame, but a circuit. The scientific method, scaled to the heliosphere, becomes an art of call and response, and the instruments are our chorus. As 3i Atlas slips away, shrinking in telescopes until it becomes a data point among data points, the sentiment that remains is paradoxically practical. Uncertainty is fertile ground. We do not require certainty to invest, only opportunity. We do not require messages to listen, only the possibility that listening improves us. The teams that chased the bursts learned to choreograph telescopes across continents, to share data at speeds that make borders irrelevant, to argue fiercely without burning bridges. This is how a civilization grows, by rehearsing its future competencies under the pressure of the unknown. In the wake of this visitor, proposals for lunar radio arrays gained urgency. Algorithms for dedispersing faint, fast transients found new audiences. Hardware for broadband, low-noise receivers came blinking into budgets. If the cosmos had intended a lesson, it could not have been kinder. Be ready, be humble, be inventive. We end where we began, in the hush between numbers, watching a line in the sky scribble and fade, listening for a sequence that may be echo or aria. The future of exploration is not a straight road, but a braid. Robotic emissaries that sprint to meet brief apparitions, patient arrays that keep vigil over a storm of subtle signals, human minds that keep both skepticism and awe in peak condition. We will launch sails that sip sunlight, drives that sip atoms, and in their wake we will plant quiet instruments on crater floors where Earth's noise can never intrude. The next stranger will come. It will call. Curve the letters of mathematics across our night. It will offer us a mirror in which to see our listening selves. When it does, we will not be caught between wonder and rigor. We will be both, fluent in the grammar of stars and the poise of explorers. Our age has wandered into a fortunate era when visitors from the interstellar dark drop by like messengers with unsealed envelopes. Let us open them with care. Let us answer with craft. And let us keep a space in our hearts for the possibility that this is how conversations begin. A glint, a pulse, a trajectory that refuses to belong to only one star, and a species that refuses to stop learning what such refusals mean,